Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Recovery Summit presentation, The Trend, State Level Law Enforcement Perspective. This webinar is part of a series hosted annually by St. Clair County Community Mental Health during the month of September, which is National Recovery Month. Today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded on the CMH YouTube channel for future reference. Please feel free to use the chat box for any questions or comments. Our presenter today will be answering questions as the presentation goes on. Continuing education credits are offered for today's presentation. If you're requesting professional credits, you must remain on the webinar for the entirety of the time and complete the survey at the end of the presentation to receive credit. Our presenter today is Trooper Corey Hebner. Corey is a 29-year trooper that has worked at 7 different work assignments. Corey's been a community services trooper for the past 12 years. We're really excited for his presentation today. It's going to be a lot of really great information. And I'd like to go ahead and welcome Corey. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, I'll put the stage over to you. Thanks, Corey.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you now and just can't see your PowerPoint. So just go ahead and throw up your PowerPoint one more time from the beginning.
Yeah,
Perfect.
there we go. All right, now
Awesome.
It's back up. Yeah,
thank you.
For some reason it wasn't letting me. And I do have a little bit of background noise, so I apologize. But my office here at the post is where we have the squawk box for all the calls that come in. So you will hear it. It's a little bit muffled, but you will hear it in the background. So I apologize. So today, with the trend, one of the things that I always try to bring a little bit to the table when we talk about different things, me, myself, and a lot of the CSTs that I work with do other things. I coach high school baseball. Jerry Backhausen, who is the CST kind of down in your area, Port Huron, Lapeer, Jerry also coaches high school baseball. And so we'll bounce a few of these things off too, because when we deal with our kiddos, a lot of those things carry over, whether it's coaching or trooping or whatever, we start to see the same thing. And that's kind of how we collect this information. This isn't just a state police law enforcement information grab. What I like to do is I like to actually go over, talk to my friends on the other side of the aisle at the lab. I'll talk with our dope teams. So there's a lot of different ways that I try to collect the information that you're going to see today for the presentation. And one of them is MiFi. So if you guys have ever been around or helped with the testing that our local high schools do with MiFi, a lot of really cool things are being derived from this. And if you don't know what MiFi is, it's the profile for healthy youth, and it assesses risky behavior. Now, not every school takes it at 7th, 9th, and 11th grade, but if you have more than 2 or 3 schools in each county, you can get county data. Each school also gets a direct report, but that's not publicly listed unless you have the opt-in. And there's 2 different versions of the test too. So you might have a school that only takes specific questions. They don't take the full MiFi. But what we found up north is we actually get a lot of great data on risky behavior, not just substance use, not just the tobacco, alcohol, and different types of drugs. You actually get some other types of risky behavior. And because of the correlation, we now have health clinics being developed in the schools. And then in addition to that, they've taken MiFi data, written grants, and gotten full-time or part-time counselors positions based on the MiFi data. So the really cool thing is we're getting a lot of robust things happening, even though our enrollment might be decreasing in some areas. Because of the data, now we're able to kind of one-stop shop for our student body. And now instead of them having to leave school, go to a doctor, maybe miss a whole half day, they can do some of these things right inside the school, never leave, talk to a PA, maybe talk to a counselor. So there's a lot of cool things coming from MiFi. I got to give a plug to our local substance-free youth coalition up here. The big one that I work with is SAFE. They cover 3 counties, Emmett, Charlevoix, Antrim. I also work with RISE over in Otsego and P2P up in Sheboygan. and they're doing a lot of really cool stuff. If you guys ever hear things like a hidden in plain sight trailer, they actually have a lot of the links on their website. So if you want to go to Safe in Northern Michigan or nm.com, you can get access to all those videos. There's a lot of cool things that they're doing. One of the biggest ones is they actually are making their own commercials, both radio and TV. They show them before movies at our local libraries, and the kids direct and star in everything that they do. So again, youth driven, just kind of adult guided. And so that's kind of the premise behind it. I always like to toss the raw data up. And if you have access to this PowerPoint, these numbers probably don't mean much to you right now. It's pretty small. But if you're able to look at those numbers, we're able to derive exactly what we get from that MiFi data in our 3 counties. And we're talking about all types, right? Alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, specific vaping numbers. And we're able to see what the trends are because it is important when you write for grants, the types of behaviors that you're trying to watch and modify. And one of the really cool things that I've seen an issue with in our small towns, right? Nothing says community like community schools. I truly believe that. And if you want to get a pulse on what's going on in your community, go to the schools, talk to the schools. What's really interesting is when I do a vaping presentation, we would see and get a lot of feedback. And a lot of my coaches, a lot of my teachers would say, hey, most kids are trying to go to bathrooms to vape, right? So the whole vape detector thing came about. The other interesting thing is specifically the locker room, because that was the area or that one bathroom that wasn't monitored as much as some of the other bathrooms that were closer to faculty staff during transition periods, right? So they said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I got a idea about what we can do. Go to your student body, to your athletes, and say, hey, listen, we have a problem with vaping in the bathroom." They're like, "Yeah, we do." Okay, cool. You guys know what secondhand smoke is? Yeah. Well, what's third hand smoke? Well, I don't know. Well, when we talk about third hand smoke, that vape juice, that those clouds, those plumes have to land somewhere. And a lot of our janitors now are using gloves when they clean, bathrooms, specifically the locker rooms, because that vape has to land on those metal surfaces and they don't want to absorb it through skin absorption. And I reminded the kids that if you want to be healthy, if you as an athlete want to make sure that you have, everything in your body is what you know to keep your body healthy, strong, and ready to go, don't let vape get in your body. And they're like, what do you mean? Well, when you go to the bathroom, those things land on toilet seats. It's on the toilet roll holders. So everything lands and it can be absorbed. And all of a sudden, all my athletes were kicking the vapors out of the bathrooms because, hey, I want to make sure that I'm, 100% pure. I want to make sure that I don't have that crap in my body. So I'm not going to allow you to do it in my bathroom. And now all of a sudden you had that peer pressure, which was that other pronged effect, right? We as administrators, we as adults can talk to kids about what their problems and issues are. But when it's kid to kid and they say, hey, I don't want that in my bathroom, all of a sudden that problem self-regulated pretty quickly. So just a tip, and I'll be around for a little bit more today to give you some more tips. One of the cool things are the commercials that the kids put in, and this is an example of one of them.
Propylene glycol, nicotine, diacetyl, arsenic, cadmium, fluorine, aluminum, lithium,
rubidium.
lead.
Do you think the vapes are really just water?
For more information, visit safeinnorthernmichigan.com.
So again, pretty quick, pretty simple, but again, it came from them, directed by them. They targeted what they thought that big problem was in that school system, and that's what we came up with. So, pretty cool. When I do a lot of public presentations, when we talk to people, we also talk about some of our biggest fears and the feedback that we get about, hey, what is coming into our community? And rainbow fentanyl is definitely one of those things that we see on Facebook really quick. Is it an issue? Is it a problem? No, not usually. And part of it is is that's not usually how we see fentanyl, but it is out there. And so I think because of the coloring, right? Everybody just has that worst case scenario. We're not seeing a ton of it. When we do see it like this, it's marketing. And so part of when we see that is very similar to when we have like the Molly, the ecstasy, the MDMA pressed in pill form rather than in liquid form. It's also the same thing we used to see with the 2,5-I, and we'll talk about that. 2,5-I was marketed as a synthetic form of LSD. It was put on that 1-inch blotter paper, but a lot of times it would be put on different types of stamps, right? It had maybe cartoon faces or other things. Again, the reason that was done and the reason this is done and the reason people add food coloring and scent to our high forms of THC when we see like shatter on the concentrated forms of THC, it's marketing. And the reason people do that are just so you know how to go back to that source at a music festival, or maybe you have multiple dispensaries in an area. And so it's a marketing thing. And we'll talk about that. That's not usually how we see this. But I also want to set the record straight. We do see it. And when we talk about the counterfeit tablets, whether it's prescription pills that we see bootlegged in from other countries like Canada or Mexico, we will talk about that. We do see colored narcotics, but it's not very common. Most of the time, it's going to be the quickest, simplest forms that we'll see, whether it's the clear color liquid or it's the powders. We will talk about xylazine specifically too, and how that's kind of a game changer if you don't know what xylazine is yet. Part of the other way that I get, some of this information are from our labs. And so you'll see some of the initials down on the bottom on some of it. Again, statewide, we're seeing this all over. It doesn't matter if you're at the Marquette lab up in the Upe or if you're down in Detroit or over in Grand Rapids. All of the labs are pretty consistent with what they're reporting. One, don't be confused. When they say they have a downturn in meth labs, what they're talking about is the old shake and bake method, where we're actually seeing the 20, 22 ounce cylinders or bigger in the one pot methods. And again, the reason that we're not seeing a lot of the one pot meth labs, we're getting better at catching people. And part of that was the over the counter medicines that people had to give their driver's license information for when they went to their Walgreens, Rite Aid, or whatever, CVS. That tracking helped catch the problem of what was going on. Again, we're starting to see uptick again. We're starting to see cocaine, specifically crack cocaine. We, in our country, we like to supersize everything. So we also like to synthesize or make more powerful drugs. And so that's kind of, the problem that we have here. We're also starting to see heroin and, again, methamphetamine. So if we're not seeing the one pot method, why does it look like methamphetamine is increasing? Because crystal meth, which is the same thing, just a different way to get it, that crystal meth we're seeing smuggled across the border, specifically from our Mexican border. MDHHS with the death data with overdosing. Here's the one big takeaway that I want you to see. We're seeing everything mixed. Our labs are reporting this consistently. Probably 70 to 75% of product isn't pure. And the other thing that we're finding from our arrest data and blood data from deceased driving is the fact that most people aren't just doing one substance. When we arrest somebody for drunk driving, a lot of times it's cheaper just to test for alcohol. But if we're testing for polysubstance use, most of the time we're seeing polysubstance use on board. And again, the opiates, right, mixed with fentanyl. We're seeing heroin mixed with the opiates or fentanyl. And the reason is a lot of people are doing polysubstance use because they're trying to mask pain. And so they're trying to, collectively get those drugs of choice. Again, statewide, whether it's meth, coke, or an opiate, we are seeing across the board pretty consistent with what we're seeing at all of our labs. The bigger findings methamphetamine, cocaine, opiates. We're not finding that anything is 100% pure. They're being, other substances, they're being cut, but we're not seeing 100% pure product. We're also starting to see a lot of prescription drugs that aren't prescription drugs. They're being bootlegged, and we're starting to see even fentanyl, carfentanil, rather than whatever that thing is. The two big takeaways here, too, tramadol and xylazine, specifically xylazine, the reversal drugs, Narcan, naloxone, don't work with xylazine. So that's very unfortunate when we talk about harm reduction. However, continue to please understand this. Please continue to give Narcan or naloxone if you think that someone's overdosing. The reason is that, again, not everything is 100% pure. So that person, if they're overdosing, isn't getting 100% pure xylazine. So you're at least able to reverse the effects of whatever else is on board. But we also know that because xylazine is cheap, the number of what we're seeing at the lab, it's going from 10 up to about 20% of what they're seeing is having xylazine replacing fentanyl, carfentanil, because xylazine is cheaper. A lot of times they're not testing for xylazine, they're testing for maybe fentanyl or carfentanil. And so as we get better at testing for these things, it's a game of chasing and beating science. And once we're able to test for xylazine, whether it's a bigger panel drug screen that we're using or whatever, we're now catching this in samples. But xylazine is that game changer because xylazine itself, the reversal drugs don't work. The other thing is the counterfeit tabs, right? We're seeing a ton of counterfeit tabs, whether it's ecstasy, Molly, MDMA. We'll get people that go to a music concert. They think that they're buying something, and it's actually fentanyl or carfentanil, right? And so we're seeing that quite a bit. The other thing is our smuggling routes. And so it's really important to understand our relationship with our Canadian friends. And when I was up in the UP for a series of about 11 years between Newberry and St. Ignace, we would train with OPP and RCMP. If something is going to be offloaded at that St. Lawrence Seaway, right, whether it's Quebec City or Montreal, it's going to be trucked across Canada. There's only one way to go east to west, and that's Highway 17. If you're going from, if you look at that big lake, right, Lake Superior, rather than go north through, from Sioux, Canada to Wawa, right? If I'm going to go east to west in Canada, I have to go either around Lake Superior or I can drop into the States and then cut across Highway 28 or M28. And so I can cut across 2 or 28. It's a lot easier. I don't have to go all the way around Lake Superior. Highway 17 up there in Ontario is a 2-lane road for most of the part. It's a pinch point, and it's also a very rough road. So a lot of Canadian truck drivers would drop down into, if they were smuggling guns, drugs, or humans, and they would cut across 2 and 28, which then shoot out all the way to Washington and Oregon. And so the other issue that we have, the other big smuggling route in our country is I-35, which comes up from Texas, from El Paso, right to Minnesota. If I'm going east to west on Highway 2 or M28, and I'm going to now connect because I'm going to either exchange guns or drugs for either, now I can smuggle that back into Texas. One of the big things that we're seeing here in Michigan, we're really good at growing marijuana. We have a really good climate for that. Right now, the big trend in Mexico is they're bulldozing marijuana fields. They're growing opiate. They're growing poppy. They're smuggling poppy up. They're taking crystal meth or methamphetamine up, and then they're taking Michigan weed or Colorado weed back down into Mexico. And so that's a trend that we've seen for probably the last 7-8 years, and it's going to continue. We get better and better. We have the leaf, flower, bud, and we'll talk about this later, 35-40% just in the flower, which is about 10 times more powerful than what we had in the 70s and early 80s. It's a completely different strain of marijuana that we're seeing. And so that's not going to change either. we supersize everything. And from that trade route, right? If we're not going to go up to the UP and then down back through or across that Canadian border, very easily I can go from St. Louis to Chicago and then shoot I-94 from Chicago across over to, to Detroit. What we see up north, most of our overdoses will start in Cadillac, not Traverse City up north. Why? Traverse City is a lot bigger city, right? The problem is Cadillac is closer to that hub of Chicago. So if it's going to come up that 131 corridor from Grand Rapids to Cadillac, most of the overdoses are going to occur quicker or first in Cadillac as opposed to Traverse City, because it's going to take a couple hours to get smuggled up. And so that's traditionally what we see up north. And so it's not the bigger cities all the time. It might be the closer cities to that spoke or that hub of where that drug gets sent from. Now, one of the things that we do talk about is alcohol, still the most readily available drug.
Hey,
and
how's
so
it going, LAB Scare? You know what? I've been trying to lose weight. I've been trying to keep the calorie.
One of the things that we've
low, but at
talked
the
about
same
for a
time,
while is what
I
we
wanna
call
go out on
smoking
weekends and get
or
shit
inhaling alcohol. And this is
I'm
what
gonna
this
show you
is.
how to get drunk without even taking a sip of alcohol. And all you need is an empty plastic bottle, bicycle pump, and a cork. First alcohol of choice, we're gonna smoke some bud. Pour it into the bottle. Nice and neatly. Next step, you take cork, pump the cork, cork the bottle. Just take the cork, put it on the bottom nice and tight, poke a hole through the cork, and start pumping.
Okay, so basically this is a science experiment. And when he breaks this seal, alcohol is actually going to form a vapor. There it is. So now he just sucks the off gas, doesn't actually have to consume the liquid, and you can see the abuse potential there. So we saw this about 7-8 years ago. I asked the guys, I said, is this a thing? Because this guy's got 3, 4, 5 million hits now on YouTube. And you hear the carnival music in the background. You don't have the ability to understand that was actually recorded over the course of 2 or 3 days. And so by the end of this, he's pretty intoxicated. And the problem is, for a health perspective, we know that these young people are binge drinkers. They're not drinking for flavor, right? They're drinking with no experience with alcohol. They're drinking and trying to get drunk. And that's exactly what this is, right? We're not even drinking or tasting the alcohol. And so I asked the guys, I said, is this a pretty crazy thing, common thing, or what? Of the 5 drunks that they had arrested that weekend, 3 normal, right? A 0.10, a 0.12. 2 people had actually tried this. And the problem is they were a 0.28 and a 0.32, right? You don't know how much you've consumed. It's based on how much pressure did you introduce to the volume of whatever you're doing. There's a whole bunch of different things. At least with volumes of alcohol, you know that a beer, 12-ounce beer, it has about 4% alcohol. And it varies. You know that a shot of alcohol has about X amount of alcohol. And the other thing that's really scary is the body's natural way to keep itself safe is to either regurgitate or pass out. The problem is by inhaling the alcohol, you've completely bypassed the digestive process, right? You're going right from the lungs to the bloodstream. And so the abuse potential was there. With alcohol, the other one that really got noticed quick is what we call palcohol, powdered alcohol. It was made for a pretty decent reason. If I'm a backpacker, a hiker, a bicyclist, right? I don't want to carry weight. So I take freeze-dried alcohol, I carry it in my pack, and then when I get to my campsite that night, I add water, I can have a mixed drink, right? The abuse potential was in our kiddos, they would get this stuff, they'd take a sucker, roll it in a powdered alcohol, pop it in their mouth, and they would sit there in class getting drunk because of that being absorbed. and nobody had a clue of why, the effect was happening. And so the abuse potential was there. So very, very quickly when alcohol came out, our Congress here in Michigan and now all 50 states and probably most of the territories made this illegal. You can still get this mail order through like Mexico or Canada, but here in the United States, you're not supposed to be able to get it shipped here. And that's why, and that's what this beast was. And always like to talk about those two things because, again, uh, we know that the trend for kids and whether they do or do not use any type of substance, it really hinges on two big factors. One, is it approved by mom and dad, right? Do mom and dad say marijuana is medicine and allow me to do it, or do they not? The other big thing is what do my friend groups tolerate, right? If my friends vape or drink, there's probably a good indication I'm going to try it too. So, Granny was right when she said, "You show me who your friends are, and I'll show you who you're going to be." There's a little bit of truth to that because those are still statistically the two biggest drivers if kids do or don't try substances. Is it peer recommended and is it parent allowed? And so that becomes a big thing. Whoop, went backwards. Sorry. Next, we're going to talk about weed, whether it's in a vape form or a leaf, and we're still doing the roll your own. That's not usually what we see with kiddos. It's not also usually what we see with initiation. Usually what we see is because of all of its forms now, most kids know that smoking is bad. So if they're going to initiate, it's usually going to be an edible or a drinkable. And so we'll talk about that. But this is very, very mainstream. If you don't know what some of these things are, High Times Magazine, been around for years and years and years. They actually have this thing called the Cannabis Cup. In Michigan, it's over in Clio Birch Run area at the old Motor City Speedway. It's now called the Birch Run Motor Speedway. And so that's where they usually have Cannabis Cup or have the last couple of years. They have it in most states, and it's very mainstream. Bong Appetit, Weedakit on Viceland. You can find out how to clone different strains, what that means, the indica, the sativa strain, how we have blends, and how we actually cook with this stuff. So there's a lot of different things that are out there, and it really truly all starts with this. Not just Juul, any type of vape. And the interesting thing is a lot of people don't understand how easy it is to take a pod, extract nicotine, and put in THC. Juul and all these other devices, they are drug delivery systems. It doesn't care what's in the pod. It will heat whatever is in the pod. And so it's really important to understand that. We assume that when we catch kids vaping, that it's nicotine. Here's the problem. We screwed up in Michigan, and hopefully it gets righted fairly quickly. Right now, because we had a congressperson, had a 20-year-old that got caught at a campus party on college, and so they changed the MIP law of alcohol from a misdemeanor to a civil infraction, right? So now if you get caught with alcohol, that's just a simple civil infraction. Because we marijuana like we did alcohol, remember that was the whole buzz, right? We want to treat marijuana like alcohol. In Michigan, minor in possession of marijuana, if you're under the age of 21, is also a civil infraction. But 4 years ago, because we were trying to go from 18 to 21, we really had to get tough on vaping. So minor in possession right now of vape is a misdemeanor, right? If it's a nicotine product, it's a misdemeanor. So if I got caught, stay with me, if I got caught by the police and I have a vape, I'm actually, if I know the game, I'm going to tell them it's actually THC because that's just a civil infraction. If I tell them it's nicotine, now it's technically a misdemeanor. And so that's the problem with what we're seeing in this industry and what we're seeing, if kids are going to try to circumvent charges. And so what are we saying also? Are we saying that it's safer because it's only a civil infraction for marijuana than nicotine? I don't think so. I think it's just a problem of laws not catching up. The problem is it's easy to do. You go on YouTube and they'll tell you how to do extraction.
Hey guys, how's it going? ATV LOL here.
Matter of fact, if you remember some of that bootleg marijuana, we actually had some problems with THC, bootleg THC causing death around the country. And that was part of it. It was the glycol that was added to it, and it didn't break down in the alveoli, and it actually created basically pneumonia. It created fluid buildup in the alveoli and the sacs in the lungs. And that's why they were having some of these vape deaths with bootleg THC. So, okay, Hebner, you're going crazy. Time out. Slow it down for me. What do you mean by some of these terms? Well, we're going to take a quiz. I got to wake you guys up. So let's try to take a quiz here. What would 40 to 5 be? Right? We got some numbers. We hear slang. Let's get good at this stuff. How about 210 or sesh? How about one love? Kush, nail. I've heard some of these terms. I don't know what they mean. Well, let's break them down for you. Upper left-hand corner, 40 to 5 is a clothing line. 40 to 5 makes stash gear. And we will talk a little bit about stash gear. Don't have a lot of time today. Obviously, we're trying to break this down for you. So I'm going to go a lot of different directions. But what time would 40 to 5 be on a clock? You got it. 4:20. So again, as kids, what do we want to do? We know that mom and dad are dumb. So we're going to toss things out there in their face. 40 to 5, obviously it's a slap in the face if you don't know what that is, because that means it's 4:20. Old school, right? How about 210? Dave Chappelle Show, half baked. 210 is half of 4:20, so half baked. Sesh is a smoking session. So if I'm gonna toss that in shorthand or in text, I'm gonna text my friends. I'm going out to at lunch. I'm going out to my car. Gonna have a sesh. One love again. Back to the Rasta, the legalized terms with the old Rasta type mentality. Kush is a purplish strain of marijuana, usually grown in Afghanistan. And a nail, that device on the bottom, or that T-shirt in the middle right. Again, no reference to sex. Nail, if you remember, you guys remember bongs, right? So bong is a reference to old school leaf. Oil rig is new school concentrates. So what I would do is either the device on the left or the right. The left one is a glass nail. The one on the right is a titanium nail. And so what I would do is I would actually pick that nail up, maybe with a pair of pliers. I'd put my dab or my concentrated form of THC on the end of it. I would take a Bernsey torch, little hand torch, and I would heat that up to about 350, 400 degrees. Then I would pop that back in that device, that oil rig, and then I would smoke or ingest it through that oil rig. So again, bong, old school, 420, oil rig, new school concentrate, 710. And so that's come of the other things here. Shatter, 710, slick balls. We'll talk about them here next. What are they? Shatter, upper right-hand corner there. That's this rock candy looking stuff. It's a very, very pure concentrated form of THC. Again, what I do is I take a 1/4 ounce bag of weed, I put it in a PVC pipe, and then I take butane, I pour in butane, I light it on fire. And then I'm going to catch those drippings, that ooey gooey plant-based stuff, into a Pyrex dish. And then what I can do is I can take alcohol, usually like Everclear, and I'm going to pour it in there, light it on fire again. What I'm doing is I'm burning all that moisture away from that plant-based material. There's a couple reasons I do this. One, I want to concentrate this, right? The less I have to have, the easier it is to hide and conceal. The other thing that I'm doing, I'm burning off the terpenes. Terpenes are what give marijuana, the plant, that odor and that scent, right? So now it's not as skunky smelling. And when you get to a thing like that, that second or third refinement process, like shatter, now it's not going to have any odor at all, which now makes it easy for me to put back in my vape, and then I can go consume it, maybe even go back to work after I'm done taking a couple hits. Slick balls, those two middle rows there in the upper middle. Anytime we see that silicone with glass, What that's going to do is it's going to give a really nice tight seal for that container. Plus, if you bake, you know what silicone is good for, right? I can hold the bottom of that little guy. I can hit the top of that with a Bernsey torch, get that concentrated form very, very liquid. I can pop in my dab of my BHO, my butane hash oil, and I can put that on my vape, or I can put it in my pod, and then I can consume it very easy. Now, a lot of kids, if they're spending that type of money, 50, 60 bucks or more for those slick balls, they're connoisseurs, right? Most kids can't afford that. So what do? They take an old Carmex container, a chapstick container that holds wax anyway, right? They hollow out that, they put in their concentrated form of THC. And again, marijuana and THC are really two different types of drugs. It is synthesized marijuana. So think of it like crack cocaine, right? Crack is a synthesized form of cocaine. THC in these concentrated forms are a synthesized concentrated version. 710, very simply, I don't do old school leaf. I don't do 420. 710 is the word oil upside down. I'm telling you, I'm new school. I probably don't even do an oil rig, but I do oil or concentrated forms of THC. And so that's what that's a reference to. And you'll see that actually on clothing. You'll see honey and a big honey bear, right? I'm not worried about allergies. Has nothing to do with taking natural local honey. That's a direct reference to concentrated forms of marijuana. So you'll start to see that, and kids will have that pop up on their shirts. We'll start to see these things. Honey butter, again, is a reference to that BHO, that butane hash oil, that butane honey oil. That's what it's a reference to. I'm taking a concentrated form of marijuana. I'm not doing leaf. I'm doing a concentrate. And so again, very, very simply, I want to go from that ooey gooey beginning up to a wax, up to a shatter. Why? The less moisture I have, the more concentrated THC it is. I need to consume and hide less of it. So it really gets into, we're going to skip this one. We don't have a lot of time to listen to Jen. But what she's going to talk about is how to do concentrates. Again, if you want to know how to do anything, even changing the dryer filament in your dryer, go to YouTube. 4 or 5 minutes, it'll tell you how to do all of this stuff. I am not an expert. How do I become knowledgeable about this stuff? I let the kids teach me. When we get a kid that gets stopped, I play farm boy dumb. Let them be the expert. Let them tell you what they do and how they do it. How do you smuggle these things in? We found out we had a 12-year-old that got caught with a vape. We're like, how do you do this? How do you sell these on the bus or get these on the bus? What we found out is we actually had a racket going on, and a 21-year-old older brother was buying these things, giving them to his little brother, and then he would sell them on the bus before school, and they kind of had their own little racketeering thing going on. So if you listen to your kids, you'll really find out a lot of different things that are going on. And so that's what we find with this. Why do you go into a dispensary and find all different colors and stuff in a dispensary? Really, truly, it's marketing, right? Just if you go into Loom, if you go into jars or whatever, chain of marijuana dispensaries you have in your area, the reason they do this is simply marketing. People like a certain flavor or a certain scent, and they add that to the concentrated forms of THC, and that's what they come up with, and that's why they do it. The other thing is if you want to follow the bouncing dot, this isn't really far-fetched. I didn't even have to do a lot of digging to this. When we talk about marijuana and the bigger picture, this was all sponsored by Big Tobacco. Why? Because you got to remember, tobacco right now, they're still getting sued because this is a product that kills people, and they have to admit it causes cancer and kills people. So the bigger thing is getting people to transition from, right? We supersize everything. So why not go from tobacco, which kills people and causes cancer, to other forms? So this was really sponsored. Look at this. And when we look at our friends to the north in Canada, again, Canada, you can go shore to shore, right? Here in Michigan, you still can't go outside the state. But when you look at the board of directors, look at who else they work for. Altria is the parent company of Marlboro, right? And so Marlboro, Camel, and all these other places. Well, look at Deborah up there in the top. She works for Diageo. George Munoz works for Munoz Beverage. or Munoz Investment Group, what do these have to do with everything else? Guess what? Munoz Beverage Group also owns. Well, why is that important? Well, when we connect the dots, we also know that the big money isn't in necessarily marijuana, it's in the edibles and the drinkables. And if you're already associated with a bottling group, and if you look at North, uh, you know, up in Canada, Canopy, which is one of the bigger marijuana groups, they have people on the board of directors from Molson Bottling. And so all of a sudden now you have associations with this. You can do the drinkables. It doesn't have to be an alcoholic beverage or a tincture. It can also be other types of things, and it can go into all your edibles, right? Because we have a preservative company like Nabisco or somebody else on board. And again, don't know that Nabisco is, but connect those dots. Look at those associations because these are going to be big, giant corporations. Look at our food industry, right? A lot of these 80 to 100 products that you see in a grocery store are actually owned by 4 or 5 mega companies. And so that's what this is really, truly all about. How do we add preservatives to keep this on the shelf longer, to get it packaged, to get it, whatever, to from point A to point B. And so that's what we're really truly seeing, not just in the food industry, but also in the marijuana industry. And again, it's about stash gear. Look at these normal looking everyday products. Very easily, you can go on Amazon, you can go on wherever, you can go on YouTube and make this yourself if you don't actually want to buy it. You can find out how to make these things reverse threaded, how you can create secret compartments behind the label of the water or pop bottle, right? The hidden void that's just naturally occurring when they put that brush together. All of those things are hidden compartments. We also see some other specific things. These lipstick containers, right? That's actually not lipstick. It's a hollowed out container where you can put different things. Booze tubes. It looks like a tampon, like a 4-pack or 5-pack of tampons. And they're not. They're clear liquid vials where you can put shots of alcohol or, marijuana or cocaine in those vials. That sweatshirt that this girl is ingesting through, that's actually a product called Vaporware. Not trying to, talk about a specific company, but that actually has a drawstring which is insulated and doesn't allow that heat to melt. And so you put the vape in the hood and then you ingest it through the straw to hide what you're doing. And it's the same thing. The other straw is a Camelback where you can actually put a fifth or whatever in your hoodie and you can actually ingest and drink through the other straw. We actually had this pop up. That is not an inhaler. That is not an asthmatic kid. That is a vape. So these things are transformers, right? They look like different products. And so we actually had a kid using that. And, at first it was passed around. It was okay because they thought it was, albuterol or whatever else somebody puts in a vape. They're specific to doing this. So with Stash Gear, some of these other companies that are creating products, whether they're Stash Gear, clothing lines with hidden compartments, know these things, look at these things. A lot of these companies will also tell you if it's a Velcro enclosure, a zipper, where these hidden compartments are, hats, pants, sweatshirts, etc. Some other ones, Seedless, NBI, 40 to 5. Again, most kids like this stuff, especially in the snowboard or ski culture. And up north, we have a lot of snowboarding culture, right? So a lot of kids will buy these clothing lines because they like the jacket, and they really truly don't know that they have hidden compartments in them. They find them and they put their cell phone or their ski pass in that hidden compartment. But, God bless them if they really don't know that that's for stash gear. They really truly may be naive because they like that clothing brand, right? It's just like your other clothing brands that kids wear with shoes or anything else. But if they are trying to stash stuff, they will specifically get these clothing lines. And again, NBI, very stylish hats. They tell you where the hidden compartments are on the clothing lines on the websites. Again, Honey, direct reference to not being an allergist and worried about my allergies and local honey. That's it. I mean, look at the t-shirt on the right. It's a little different, right? High fives for low lives. So again, I'm telling you what I'm into. I want to put that out there. Why? Because the adults in my life don't really know. So ask questions. That's how you know. Play dumb. I love playing dumb. You're going to get a lot more with honey as opposed to, I'm sorry, pun intended. Seedless. Again, I screenshotted this. I swear to God, didn't make it up. Seedless blue jeans. If you look at that last line, last but not least, a detachable nutsack stash bag that connects inside the crotch area to keep your valuables by the family jewels. Again, it has an audience of a select group of people. Another good shot of that vaporware sweatshirt, right? So they're actually ingesting right through the straws. Now, some of the other drugs that we'll talk about, we're going to break them into groups, and I'm going to kind of fly through these a little bit more because I know that we're kind of drawn short on time. But they all started, the synthetic drugs all started with bath salts. So bath salts, K2, spice, it all got made illegal pretty quickly. We see a whole bunch of other things to pop up. Some are actually natural and legal. Salvia in the upper right-hand corner. Go on YouTube, look at salvia trips. You'll actually see some pretty bad things when people ingest this stuff. We see people trying to brew rue seed tea. Rue is like fescue. It's a really quick grass that tries to pop up to save your actual grass seed when birds try to eat your grass. So if you grew a new lawn, you might actually know what rue is. And so you can actually go to Quality Farm and Fleet and get a 50-pound bag. We have kids that take a gallon jug, put in rue seed, and then we'll fill it full of water, and it's like making prison hooch, right? You're going to let that ferment for a couple weeks, and then you're going to drink it. And there are kids that swear that they get buzzes off of it. The bottom line, if I've got kids seeking and using, even if it's going old school, if they're huffing, right? What are they trying to do? And so when we as counselors, when we sit down and talk to these kiddos, the underlying thing is the reason they're doing this, the reason they're pushing boundaries, they're masking pain. They're trying to escape from something because of some underlying trauma. And so these are great reasons to ask questions, to talk. And even though it may not be an illegal substance, right? Kratom is another one that kind of falls into this category because Kratom isn't illegal yet. And so to ask these questions, why are you doing this? That's going to be the thing when you peel that onion back a layer at a time. Ecstasy tabs, again, we usually don't see ecstasy like this. We usually see X and MDMA and Molly in a clear, colorless liquid. It's going to get usually dropped into water and consumed. Why do we see this? It's marketing, right? If I go to that music festival and I get a clear, colorless liquid, it's going to look like everything else. If I get that one tab that's scored or stamped a specific way, now I can go back and get it specifically from that same dealer at a rave. And it was the same thing with 2,5-I, right? Most of the time when we get blotter acid on paper, it's just going to be 1 inch by 1 inch white squares, right? We're not going to do all this marketing unless it's at a bigger venue where I want that person to return to me. And so the reason I do that is because I want that person to ask for it specifically. And we know with kiddos, right? That scares us because it looks like art and it can be absorbed through skin. Again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, the old one pot method. If you look on the bottom left, right, that Coricidin or the DXM and lithium batteries, specific rechargeable batteries, those had to be parts of the ingredients when we did the old shake and bake method. And so because it's expensive, it's kind of very difficult to do it now. We don't see it as much. But what they were trying to do, if you look at the upper left-hand corner, they're trying to harvest that cake in the bottom. So what they would do is after they mix this combination and they off-gassed or burped it at the right time, they would take coffee filters, they would filter all that through, and they would try to dry up that cake. And so that's what they would try to do. We're seeing a big switch to crystal. And so that's why it's called crystal meth. If we're going to see methamphetamine, this is the Breaking Bad, right? The teacher retirement plan. And so that's what we're seeing now being smuggled up from Mexico. It's able to be made very, very cheaply, and it looks like a crystal or an agate. So that's why it gets its term. the Molly, the ecstasy, the MDMA. The reason that this got, popular, Miley Cyrus, she talked about partying with Molly in the lyrics of her song. Over on the right, Lindsay Lohan. This was their drug of choice at the time. Electric Forest, that's over by me, north of Muskegon. And so the black lights, the glow lights, it's very trippy. Each drug that we talk about usually has its own counterculture and some signs and symptoms if I belong to that culture. The other thing that we see with the DXM or the dextromethorphan, again, not getting drunk from the cough syrup with the alcohol, is the DXM, the double stack styrofoam cups, terms like purple drink or purple lean. That was Justin Bieber's drug of choice when he was drag racing the Lamborghinis, Lil Wayne's drug of choice. And if I don't drink it, I can also skittle it. Robo tripping is also another term. It got its term skittling because a Coricidin tab looks like a skittle. And so these are things that we're seeing in kid culture. Again, when we see the clothing lines, some of those telltale signs, the blue or the purple shirts with the bloodshot eyes. And then we talk about heroin, right? And our opiate based painkillers. Heroin and opiate based painkillers all come from the poppy plant. If it's going to be street drugs, usually it's going to be Mexico and Colombia smuggled across our border. If it's heroin in a different type of form, or if it's our opiate based painkillers made in a lab, usually grown in Afghanistan, taken and it's 100% pure coming from a lab. And again, how do we know? Look at the root word of the generic equivalent, right? The name brand Vicodin doesn't mean anything to us. But if we look at that root of the generic, right, a codone or a codeine usually gives us an indication that that drug of choice is an opiate-based painkiller. Oxycontin means nothing. Oxycodone, the generic equivalent, tells us what that is, right? Fentanyl, again, why do we see abuse of fentanyl, carfentanil? Usually, this is the reason it's more powerful, it's stronger, is because it's usually in a veterinary setting, right? This was a drug that was made high powered for big pain in big animals. So, horses, cows, and zoo animals, right? Why did we have such a problem with this? Statistic on the right. We did it wrong in our country. We had 75% or 80% of the world's usage, even though we're 5% of the world's population. We consumed a lot of drugs in our country. And the problem is when we got cut off from our drug of choice, 54% of the time, we could still see that drug of choice in the medicine cabinet at a friend or a neighbor's house. So we were still able to find that stuff. Stinky Steve will talk about. Somebody always asks about Lara. How does Lara regulate this stuff? Actually, for getting a big ball of goo with the marijuana industry, Lara does a really good job. Very quickly, they'll take a product, and if you look at the one on the bottom right there, that picture, they said, you know what? Hey, that looks way too much like candy. We don't like that. Take it off the shelf. And so within a couple of days of that being at a dispensary on a shelf, they made it illegal. One of the things that I want to leave you guys with, if you want to screenshot this or take a pic, I want to give you resources. So a couple, Jermaine Galloway, Tall Cop Says Stop, phenomenal resource. Arrowwood or drug.org. If you have a pill and you find it in your hallway on the floor in a bathroom, if you put in the shape, how it's scored, how it's marked, or whatever, it will give you a pretty good indication, even if it's an acetaminophen or a Tylenol or something like that. It will give you a really good idea of what that is. And then the last one, Urban Dictionary. If you hear street slang, you don't know what it means, plug it in. It'll give you 3-4 ideas of what that means. It'll give you the colloquial, regional types of things of what we're seeing. And they try to keep up to date and update it just like a Wikipedia page. So I appreciate you guys. I know I ran a little long, but I want to give you at least 5 minutes for some questions because you guys scare me. You guys have been quiet.
Thanks, Corey. Just a lot of comments on amazing. Wish the presentation was longer, how good it was, a lot of practical stuff. If there's any other, and just a lot of really just positive feedback. One of the things, Corey, if you don't mind sharing, is that so you work for the MSP. So really the way that we found you for our recovery summit is I did some Googling and looked around and happened to come across the Michigan State Police website where it talked about the different presentations that you do. So if there's other organizations or folks that are on, how do they get a hold of you? What kind of presentations do you do? If you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so we have 18 community service troopers statewide. And so we should be at one of the local posts to you, down by you, Jerry Bockhausen. I work a lot with Jerry. And so he's the closest one at the Lapeer post. Metro North, we don't have a CST right now, but we do any type of presentation. I've even created presentations because we didn't have anything to kind of cover it. And it's actually the next time when we talk, it's going to be on social media addiction. And we're actually finding we actually did some training with a guy that actually worked for Google and another one that worked for Anheuser-Busch. And they actually did the social media marketing. And they said, this is absolutely addiction. And we know that when we work with kiddos that are addicted, the younger that you're exposed to addiction, the harder it is to break that cycle. There's a reason that Apple gave iPads to 5-year-olds. They're not a great company for doing it. What they're doing is they're ensuring that they have customers for life. And so the reason that these grants were given to schools were because they wanted to addict kids. They know that it all attaches to the dopamine reward in the frontal lobe of the brain. And so that's really what we're talking about with any type of addiction. And so we'll do that. We'll do human trafficking, vaping or anything like this, active shooter trainings. So whether it's Craze or Alice or whatever your school is doing, when we talk about the BTAM training that we're now all doing, the behavioral threat analysis, we're doing all of those types of things too. So if your administrative staff wants to look at a plan, if they want to sit down up north, I actually do lockdown drills with a lot of our schools too. And so we'll do anything. We want to make sure that we're trying to fit that. If you don't have a school resource officer in a school, if you do, we want to network with them. We don't want to step on any toes. But if you're a smaller school, don't have that school resource officer, we want to try to assist you in any way, shape, or form too. So that's a lot of what we really try to do. We try to fill in the cracks, not step on toes or take things over. I know a couple people get scared with that. Oh, you're in the state police. No, we're just trying to make sure because there's not enough of us to go around, especially when they took away that grant money just recently. So we want to make sure that we're able to help in any way that we can. And whatever your school needs, whatever your counseling staff needs, we'll train them up and we'll try to make sure that we're all talking on the same page. A lot of our health departments up here also have hidden in plain sight trailers. So they're specifically trailers that look like kids' bedrooms. And we actually sit down at parent teacher conferences, do a lot of one-on-one talking with parents and caregivers and teachers about what stash gear is and what we see, what the trends are.
Wow, that's a lot of information. I know it's super helpful. From the past couple of years that we've had a recovery summit, we do a lot on our local perspectives from law enforcement for our county. So we really wanted to bring someone in from a state perspective too, which was extremely helpful. If anyone's interested in, like you said, coordinating with their local, resource officers in the school or their health department to talk to you guys about coming and do a presentation, how do they get a hold of you?
Michigan.gov/MSP. And then you can go on the Grants and Community Services site and see where we as CSTs, all of us are listed. You can also get a hold of me. My email is just hebnerc@michigan.gov. My cell phone is 989-619-3009. And whether it's your school, your recovery community, I was the guinea pig for the Angel program 8 years ago. If you know what the NMORC or the Northern Michigan Rural Opioid Consortium, I'm one of the board members of that. And so we do a lot of stuff with our recovery community. Matter of fact, this Friday, if you're in the Petoskey area with our recovery community, we're actually doing karaoke, where I'm actually hosting karaoke for our recovery community at one of the things that we're doing with Community Recovery Alliance. So it's just one of those things that we are, part of the community. and we want to get used. And we want to try to break down that stigma.
Very cool. Karaoke, that's great. Do you sing or just host?
No, my God, please. I hope I don't have to sing.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. We cannot thank you enough, Corey, for taking the time to be with us today. We really appreciate it. It's a lot of great information. I have a feeling you'll have a lot of folks, reaching out to you as well. And we want to thank everyone for attending today. You hope you found the information very valuable. Sounds like it has been from all of the comments. And we just want to remind everybody today's presentation is one of many webinars scheduled throughout the month of September. As a reminder, we still have sessions that are leading us up to our end on the 27th of September. So to see that information and to register for those sessions, please visit us at our website at sccmh.org under the events tab, and you'll look under the Recovery Summit. So before we wrap up, we would really like to appreciate and get your feedback. We're also going to send Corey the feedback from the session as well. So a short survey will pop up on your screen very shortly at the end of this. So we kindly ask that you take a few moments to complete it. Your input is really crucial in helping us as a community mental health improve future events, the Recovery Summit, and better meet your needs. And for those of you that are getting CEs or professional credits, please allow 2 to 3 weeks after the summit. So the Recovery Summit ends on the 27th of September. So 2 to 3 weeks after that, you will get your certificates emailed to you of completion for the Recovery Summit with the wrap up of all of your professional credits. So thanks again for joining today. Thanks again, Corey. We appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing everyone hopefully at the next session. Have a great day, everyone.